Hey, yo, what up, y'all? I'm back with another episode of Addish. Today is about a day in the life of a strategist and being in service of the work. Now, I'm not going to hold you, man. I shot this episode quite a few times, edited it, and it just ain't feel right, so I did it over. And plus, the kid got some new Morehouse merch in. I haven't been able to rep the alma mater in years. So, with that said, a day in the life of a strategist. Really simple, right? A typical day can be atypical. And what I mean by that is some days I'm doing research. Some days I'm talking to consumers. Some days I'm just straight up doing deck writing. And I think of that three, deck writing is probably the one that is the most utilized skill that I have these days. So typically deck writing is all about storytelling, right? So in a perfect world, everybody could just understand exactly the thoughts that are coming out of your head, right? You wouldn't even have to communicate them. But typically with this industry and really any industry in general, when you're coming up with ideas get passed around, right? They get passed around in between teams. They get passed around in between companies. And you have to make sense of these ideas in order for them to get sold in. So in an earlier video, I talked about how part of our job is coming up with insights. The insights will inform a strategy. The strategy will then get packaged into a creative brief, something that I typically write. And then it would get shipped to the creative team, or the creative team would get briefed. And then that would essentially turn into them coming up with ideas for campaigns. All of this requires writing, right? You have to write the insight. You have to write a strategy. In order to turn that into a creative brief, you have to build out a story. You can't just come to creatives and say, hey, this is an insight. This is a strategy. All right, go forth. I'm gonna holler at y'all. I've literally seen it, and it's something I've had to get better at, because I'll see like the disconnects happen on their faces sometimes. And it's like, oh shit, okay, no, you got to go back. You got to write this a little better. So like any story, like any book you read, a lot of the deck writing that I do has to have like a beginning, middle, and end, right? So you have to tee up the business problem in a creative brief. Then you have to get to the crux of what the actual problem is. And then you have to end with how, the product could solve this problem, and then send a charge to creatives saying, hey, go forth and create. Tell us how we can solve this problem. So in terms of deck writing, you have creative briefs, but then you also have just general overall helping sell in the ideas. So a lot of my job may be sitting behind my trusty old computer right here and trying to figure out how to finesse slides in order to better tell a story of the idea. And again, something I'm reminded of by my team is that, a lot of this work passes through hands. So you have to write in such a way that it's simple enough that, a 5-year-old can follow more or less, because somebody's seeing this for the first time. And yeah, it may have taken a lot of complex work to get to where you're at right now, but it needs to be written in a way to where they can understand it really quick, decide, yes or no, am I going to sign off on this, or does this need to go back in the oven for a little bit? And again, same kind of structure a lot of the times. A lot of the times you still have to do that story of beginning, middle, end. So creators may come up with an idea. They may have 2 or 3 ideas that they want to show to the client. And again, in a perfect world, you could just say, hey, here's an idea. What's up? What do you think? But you have to remember that clients are busy, just like you're busy. So they may not even remember half the stuff they briefed you on. They may have written a brief for you and then went off to another project. It's totally fine, because our job, if you're going to be a strategist, is to make sure that you can help them recall how we got here, right? It's just a quick refresh. How did we get here? What's our job? Here are the solves that we came up with for that particular job. Beginning, middle, end. Story structure, very simple, straight to the point, right? And this can take on, different iterations depending on what I'm working on. But that is pretty much the job in a nutshell. Deck writing, research, and working closely with creative teams. So you're probably wondering, or you may not be, why do I have these books right here? Why do I have this? Again, part of the day in the life of a strategist, when I talk about research, is looking for inspiration too. So creatives aren't the only people who need inspirations or who need inspiration. Oftentimes when I'm coming up with a strategy, these days I'm looking for inspo too. I'm looking for things that can help me look at the consumer problem in a different way. And I typically find some of my muses through fashion, streetwear, and just design in general. So sometimes I need to get my mind off the actual problem so that subconsciously it'll lead me back to a solution for the problem, if that makes sense. So I'll pick up a book like this, Black Ivy, of course, the iconic Miles Davis on the front. And the whole thing is about how, Black people subverted Ivy fashion back in the 50s and made it our own. Really dope read, a lot of dope pictures in there. Or I might pick up, this book by Virgil, Something's Off. And I may just look at his design principles and kind of just sit back and think for a little bit, like, how did he come up with that? How did he solve his particular problem in his industry? What can I learn from that and apply to my industry? And then last but not least, you got your handy dandy laptop, man. Research on here isn't just limited to going to places like Pew Research or, Bloomberg or any of those places. Shout out to them, no disrespect. But also a huge part of what you're going to do is cultural research. And cultural research means going to places like Complex. It means going to places like Reddit. It means going on TikTok. Sometimes, depending on what I'm working on, like for a recent pitch, I was on TikTok for just like an hour, just trying to figure out, like, why is Gen Z doing that? Why? Because, getting old now. But social media is the great equalizer. So I'm able to use that to understand why consumers are doing what they're doing. So in a nutshell, again, day in the life, it could be deck writing, it could be research, working closely with creative teams, which again goes into the segue for the next part of the episode. So if you need a water break, I'm gonna give you 2 seconds and then we're gonna get to it. 1, 2, hey, welcome back. Great. Let's talk about being in service of the work. This is the part of the episode that I shot a couple times, and I thought about it some more about what that means, especially if you're a junior coming in and you're watching this. Being in service of the work is all about doing what you can to make sure that the product turns out as great as it possibly can. Ego aside, personal opinions on the work aside, how can I be in service of the work? And this is something that the founder of the agency I'm at now, he says this a lot, just how to best serve the work. And as a strategist, your job is to do that as well. So this often reminds me, I was watching, I like to watch old interviews, producer interviews, whole bunch of stuff for inspo. And I was watching a Rick Rubin interview from 60 Minutes a couple of weeks ago. And if you watch the interview, he essentially talks about the fact that he has no technical knowledge when it comes to music. Like, he doesn't know theory like that. He doesn't know how to use a drum machine. He can't mix anything on a mixing board, but he still does what he can to be in service of the work. And that's why artists call him. They call him because, as he put in the interview, he's very sure of his taste and he helps them get to the best idea, right? He doesn't go in there and say, I want these drums, so these are going to be the drums on here. Or I want this lead, so, I'm Rick. It has to happen this way. And the same thing with strategists, right? Typically, you'll be working with your creative team and they may have an idea. It may be something that, needs a little bit of finessing in order to put in front of clients, right? Our job is to shepherd that work, right? To make sure it can be the best version of itself. The idea in and of itself may be really good. Now your job is to go back and see if you can support that with evidence. See if you can support that and show how it makes sense for the brief you've been given, the charge you've been given to help this business out, right? And that often days is your best utility. And kind of talking about what we did in the earlier episode, being in service of the work means that you recognize that a good idea can come from anywhere. And this is something creative has to recognize too. And luckily, I've worked with creatives who are just super flexible on this. But like, it's recognizing that the best idea could come from you. It could come from strat. It can come from account. It can come from the person at reception. It can come from the pizza guy dropping stuff off. Good ideas come from anywhere. Now, again, when those ideas come in, your job is to help make sense of them and to help sell in the work. And that, again, goes back to storytelling. So at the risk of rambling, I kind of just want to press forward the notion that as a strategist, if you're a junior and you're getting into this and you're trying to figure out like what's your goal or what's the purpose of strategy in a nutshell, it's all about shepherding the work. It's all about making sure that the work can be the best version of itself, supporting that with evidence, clearly explaining out ideas, storytelling as well. Like, I've seen some masterful storytelling over the past couple of years from people I really admire. And it was the difference between a mid idea getting sold and turned into something and a great idea not going anywhere. It all came down to storytelling, and great strategists who do great strategy work that helps the clients understand and get to a decision quickly about whether they like something or not. And then oftentimes I'm even reminded that sometimes, there's not going to be a rhyme or reason per se why clients like an idea, but I would venture to say that a lot of times it's because of the strategy work that helps set things up. If it's good, it shouldn't even raise a red flag with them, when you're going through to your ideas. It'll just get to a point where they're looking at the ideas and they're like, oh yeah, all this makes sense. So with that said, man, I'm about to wrap up here and preserve what is left of my voice. But just remember, a day in the life of a strategist, a lot of it is deck writing. A lot of it is research, working closely with creatives. But then there's the part about being in service of the work. And as far as the insight for the week, oh man, it's a doozy. Not really, but it's cool. I was looking for the 1/4-inch thread that goes on the tripod that I was using to film, and it was right in front of me the whole time. And it reminded me that sometimes the things you are looking for are right in front of you. And other times they're also looking for you. So just remember that. I don't know who's calling me, but I think that's my cue to wrap up. So I'm gonna catch y'all in a bit, man. Peace.